Imagine standing outside deep in the ice age as the wind howls like a hungry wolf. Snow is falling so heavily that you can barely see your own hands. The temperature is far below freezing, and there are no warm jackets, no electric heaters, and no safe houses to protect you. For a caveman living thousands of years ago, this was reality. Surviving the winter was not just difficult, it was a matter of life and death. Entire families could freeze if they weren't prepared. Yet somehow our ancestors endured these brutal storms and lived long enough to pass their knowledge down, generation after generation. So how did they do it? How did humans, without modern tools or technology, keep themselves alive during some of the harshest winters the Earth has ever seen? In this video, we'll step back in time and uncover the secrets of survival. From building shelters in frozen landscapes to mastering fire, to wearing animal furs thicker than any coat you own, we'll explore the incredible strategies cavemen used to outsmart nature. By the end, you'll realize something powerful. The reason you're alive today is because your ancestors were strong, clever, and determined enough to face the coldest winters head-on. Let's begin our journey back in time. Winter during the Ice Age was nothing like the winters we know today. Modern winters may be uncomfortable, but for cavemen they were deadly. Temperatures could drop so low that unprotected skin would freeze in minutes. A single storm could last for days, burying entire valleys under thick snow. Food became scarce in winter months. The animals that cavemen hunted either migrated to warmer areas or were harder to track in the snow. Plants and fruits were gone, hidden under layers of ice. Without food, the body grew weak, making it even harder to fight against the cold. But the biggest danger wasn't just hunger. It was the relentless chill. Hypothermia could set in quickly, and frostbite could cripple a hunter's hands and feet. A person caught in a storm without shelter stood almost no chance of survival. This is why cavemen had to plan ahead. They could not simply wait for the cold to pass. They had to adapt, finding ways to create warmth, store food, and build shelters that could withstand freezing winds. Think about this. Humans are not naturally built for cold weather. We don't have thick fur like wolves. We don't hibernate like bears. And yet our ancestors managed to survive in icy landscapes, filled with constant danger. The key was not brute strength but intelligence, learning to use the world around them to fight back against nature. Winter storms were a test of resilience. Only those who could prepare, adapt, and endure would live long enough to see spring. And those survival skills became the foundation of human progress. When the winter storms struck, the first line of defense for cavemen was shelter. Without it, no amount of fur or fire could protect them for long. Shelter was survival. The most obvious choice was a cave. Natural caves offered protection from the wind, snow, and predators. Deep inside, the temperature stayed more stable compared to the freezing air outside. Cavemen would choose caves facing away from strong winds, often blocking the entrance with stones, branches, and animal hides to keep the heat in. But not every group was lucky enough to find a good cave. When caves weren't available, cavemen had to get creative. They built shelters out of whatever they could find: branches, mud, and animal skins. Imagine a structure similar to a tent, with wooden poles covered in thick hides. Inside, the family would huddle together, bodies pressed, close to share warmth. In some colder regions, people even built shelters from snow itself. These looked like primitive versions of igloos. Snow, surprisingly, is an excellent insulator. By carving out a dome-shaped shelter, they could trap heat inside, creating a space much warmer than the icy winds outside. Insulation was the key. Cavemen lined their shelters with moss, grass, and animal furs. They spread thick layers on the floor so that they wouldn't have to sleep directly on the frozen ground. Even a small difference in temperature could mean the difference between life and death. Fire was often placed in the center of the shelter. Smoke holes were carved out to allow ventilation. At night, the fire kept burning, casting shadows on cave walls while families stayed wrapped in hides listening to the wind howl outside. Shelters were not just physical protection, they gave psychological safety too. Imagine being in total darkness, snow piling outside, predators lurking nearby. Inside the shelter, with firelight flickering and family close, cavemen felt a sense of control in a world that was otherwise unpredictable and dangerous. This mastery of building and adapting shelters showed that early humans were not helpless, victims of nature. They were engineers, problem solvers, and survivors. By turning caves, branches, and even snow into homes, cavemen created their own small pockets of warmth in an otherwise frozen world. If shelter was the first shield against winter storms, then fire was the heart that kept cavemen alive. Without fire, survival in the Ice Age would have been nearly impossible. Fire was warmth. Imagine the bitter cold outside, snowflakes stinging the skin, winds howling like a beast. Inside the shelter, a small flame flickered. That flame meant life. It kept the air warm enough to stop the deadly grip of frostbite. Families huddled close to the fire, their shadows dancing on the cave walls, as sparks crackled and smoke drifted upward. But fire wasn't just about warmth. It was protection. Predators, whether wolves, cave lions, or even bears, were afraid of flames. A ring of fire around a campsite created a barrier that most animals wouldn't dare to cross. For cavemen, this was safety in the darkness. Then there was food. Before fire, meat was eaten raw, which was not only tough to chew but also dangerous. With fire, cavemen discovered cooking. Cooked meat gave more energy, was easier to digest, and kept them healthier. In the middle of a storm, a pot of hot stew or roasted meat could mean the strength to survive another day. Starting a fire, however, was no simple task. Cavemen didn't have matches or lighters. They had to learn how to spark flames with flint stones, striking them together to create sparks. Others used friction, rubbing wooden sticks against each other until heat built up enough to ignite dry grass. Some groups carried burning embers in wooden containers or wrapped in bark, keeping the fire alive as they moved from place to place. Losing fire in the middle of a storm could mean death, so they guarded it with care. Over time, cavemen became masters of fire. They learned to control it, to feed it with the right kind of wood, and to keep it burning through long nights. Fire also became the center of their culture. Around the flames, they told stories, sang chants, and painted the walls of caves. Firelight connected them not only to survival, but to each other. Think about how powerful this was. Before fire, humans were just another vulnerable creature in a world filled with predators. With fire, they became something more. Builders, thinkers, and survivors who could face the coldest winters head-on. In every roaring storm, in every frozen night, fire was the difference between life and death. It was not just a tool. It was the lifeline of survival. Fire gave cavemen warmth, but it wasn't enough on its own. To step outside during a snowstorm, they needed armor against the cold. That armor came in the form of clothing, simple, but life-saving. At first glance, cavemen might look wild and bare-skinned in old paintings or cartoons, but the truth is different. Early humans were skilled in using the resources around them, and one of the most valuable resources was animal hide. After a successful hunt, they didn't just eat the meat. They used every part of the animal. The skin became coats. The fur became blankets. Even tendons were turned into threads for sewing. Thick animal furs worked like natural jackets. Mammoth, bison, reindeer, and wolf hides offered insulation far beyond what the human body could provide. By wrapping themselves in layers of fur, Cavemen created a barrier against the brutal winds. It was the Ice Age version of layering winter clothes, but fur alone wasn't enough. Cavemen also learned to line their clothing with grasses, moss, and even feathers to trap heat. Imagine stuffing your boots with dried grass so your feet wouldn't freeze solid. It may sound primitive, but this simple trick saved countless lives. Tools helped too. With bone needles carved from animal remains, they stitched hides together, shaping cloaks, leggings, and boots. Over time, clothing became more fitted, wrapping the body tightly to hold in warmth. Some groups even created hoods to protect their heads and faces, knowing that much of the body's heat is lost from the scalp. For the youngest and oldest in the group, insulation was even more critical. Children with their smaller bodies lost heat quickly. Elders with weaker health needed extra protection. Families would often wrap them in the thickest hides, making sure the most vulnerable were shielded from the deadly cold. Clothing wasn't just practical, it gave freedom. With proper insulation, cavemen could leave the safety of their shelters to hunt, gather firewood, and explore, even during harsh storms. Without it, they would have been trapped inside, slowly starving or freezing. Think about this. Without the invention of clothing, humans might never have survived the Ice Age at all. It was this clever use of nature's materials that allowed our species to expand into frozen lands, where no bare-skinned creature could endure. So, while fire warmed their homes, clothing warmed their bodies. Together, these defenses gave cavemen the chance to face the storm instead of falling victim to it. In the middle of a winter storm, warmth was only half the battle. The other half was food. Without enough energy, the human body couldn't fight the freezing cold. Cavemen understood this well. They knew that survival meant not only eating, but also planning ahead, storing food long before the storms arrived. During the warmer months, hunting was easier. Herds of mammoth, reindeer, and bison roamed the open plains. Cavemen worked together to hunt these massive animals, sometimes chasing them into traps or off cliffs. A single mammoth could provide enough meat, fat, and hides to keep a whole group alive for weeks. But meat doesn't last forever. If left unprepared, it would spoil quickly. This is where cleverness came in. Cavemen discovered ways to preserve their food. One method was drying meat over fire, turning it into a tougher but longer-lasting source of nutrition. Another method was freezing. Nature itself provided the perfect freezer, the snow. By burying meat deep under ice or cold ground, they could store it for months without it rotting. Fat was gold in the Ice Age diet. It carried more energy than lean meat and gave the body the fuel it needed to survive the cold. Hunters often favored animals rich in fat, knowing that it could keep them strong through the harshest storms. Eating fat wasn't just a choice, it was survival science. Gathering plants was difficult in winter, but cavemen didn't ignore it. In warmer seasons, they collected nuts, roots, and berries, storing them in animal skin pouches or baskets made of reeds. These became valuable backup foods when hunting failed. But food wasn't only about filling the stomach. It was also about sharing. Survival was nearly impossible for an individual. Cavemen lived in groups, and when one hunter succeeded, the entire clan benefited. A shared meal strengthened not only the body but also the bond between people. Around the fire, they ate together, told stories, and kept morale alive. Storms often trapped them inside for days. Imagine being in a cave, snow blocking the entrance, the fire burning low. Without stored food, hunger would set in quickly. But with dried meat hanging from wooden racks and fat-rich stew simmering over the flames, they could wait out the storm, patient and strong. Nutrition gave them endurance. Endurance gave them hope. And hope was just as important as any weapon against the cold. By mastering the art of hunting, storing, and sharing food, Cavemen transformed the harshest winters into battles they could win. Without these skills, humanity's story might have ended under the snow. If there was one truth about survival in the Ice Age, it was this: no one survived alone. A single caveman, no matter how strong or skilled, had little chance against the bitter cold, wild predators, and endless hunger of winter. But together, as a community, humans had a fighting chance. Cooperation was the glue that held survival together. Shelters were built faster when many hands worked. While some gathered wood and stone, others stretched hides over the openings or lined the floor with grass. Hunting was more successful when groups worked as teams, one group chasing prey toward traps while others lay in wait. Even simple tasks like carrying heavy logs for firewood became possible only when done together. Sharing was essential. When a hunter brought down a large animal, the meat wasn't kept for himself. It was divided among the group. This meant that if another hunter failed the next day, he would still eat. Everyone's survival depended on trust. Selfishness weakened the group, but cooperation made them stronger. Community also gave protection. At night, when storms raged outside and predators prowled in the darkness, families huddled together in shelters. The warmth of many bodies pressed close could save lives. Even in caves where the cold bit hard, the combined heat of a group made the air more bearable. Beyond survival, cooperation built something deeper: morale. Winter was not just physically hard, it was mentally exhausting. Endless nights, howling winds, and constant danger could break the spirit. But cavemen had rituals that kept them strong. They told stories by firelight, painted symbols on cave walls, and sang chants that connected them to something greater than fear. Elders shared knowledge, teaching the young how to make tools, how to read the skies for weather, and how to stay alive in the wilderness. Women often prepared hides, preserved food, and cared for children, ensuring the next generation was strong. Children learned by watching, slowly growing into the hunters and gatherers who would one day lead. Community was survival, but it was also the seed of culture. Working together taught humans that they were more than individuals. They were a species capable of shaping the future. It was this unity that separated us from the predators we feared and made us masters of survival. Without community, the storm would swallow them. With community, they stood a chance, and that chance was all they needed. Surviving the Ice Age was not only about building shelters, making fire, or wearing warm clothes. It was also about understanding the environment, learning to live with nature instead of against it. Cavemen became masters of adaptation. One way they adapted was by following the animals. Large herds of mammoth, bison, and reindeer moved with the seasons, searching for food. Cavemen learned to track these migrations and move with them. By shadowing the herds, they secured both meat and hides, ensuring survival even during the coldest months. They also learned to read signs in the land and sky. Dark clouds, sudden winds, or the way animals behaved could signal an approaching storm. This gave them precious time to prepare, gathering firewood, sealing shelters, and storing food before the blizzard struck. In some regions, groups migrated seasonally. They built temporary camps in warmer lowlands during winter, then returned to higher grounds in summer. Moving with the weather required planning and cooperation, but it reduced the risk of being trapped in deadly conditions. Cavemen also adapted mentally. Survival wasn't just about strength, it was about endurance and mindset. Spiritual beliefs often played a role. Many groups believed in nature spirits, ancestors, or gods who controlled the storms. Rituals, chants, and offerings gave them courage when facing the unknown. Whether these beliefs were true or not, they gave hope, and hope was a powerful survival tool. Over generations, adaptation became instinct. Knowledge was passed down, how to build stronger shelters, how to prepare food for long winters, how to stay warm and united. These lessons didn't just help them survive, they helped humanity grow. The Ice Age was unforgiving. But instead of breaking under its weight, humans bent, adjusted, and adapted. And it was this ability to adapt that separated cavemen from every other creature struggling in the snow. The Ice Age was one of the greatest challenges humanity has ever faced. For cavemen, winter storms were more than just bad weather. They were battles for survival. Every blizzard tested their strength, their intelligence, and their spirit. We've seen how they faced these storms with courage and creativity. They built shelters out of caves, branches, and even snow. They tamed fire, turning it into warmth, protection, and a place of community. They clothed themselves in the hides of animals, sewing together insulation that turned them into walking fortresses against the cold. They hunted, stored food, and learned to rely on fat-rich diets to power their bodies through the freezing months. And above all, they survived because they stood together, sharing resources, knowledge, and hope. It wasn't brute force that saved them. It wasn't luck either. It was intelligence, adaptability, and unity. Cavemen learned to use everything nature offered: stone, wood, fur, even snow itself, to turn the impossible into the possible. And here's the remarkable truth. Without their resilience, none of us would be here today. Every one of us carries the blood of people who fought those storms, who refused to give in, who passed down their survival skills through countless generations. Think about it. Each time you put on a warm coat, light a fire, or gather with family, on a cold night you are echoing the actions of your ancestors. Their struggle, their determination, and their victories against the cold are written in your very existence. The Ice Age eventually ended, but the lessons remained. Humanity moved forward, carrying the knowledge of survival, adaptation, and cooperation. Those lessons didn't just help us endure winters. They helped us build civilizations, discover new lands, and thrive in every corner of the earth. So the next time you see snow falling outside your window, remember this. Long before cities, heaters, or technology, our ancestors were out there in storms that could kill in hours, and yet they survived. They survived because they were clever, resourceful, and united. That is the story of cavemen against the winter storms. Not just a tale of survival, but a reminder of the strength we all carry within us. The strength to endure, to adapt, and to keep moving forward no matter how harsh the storm. And that's how our ancestors survived the unforgiving winter storms of the Ice Age. Their courage, intelligence, and unity are the reasons we exist today. Every time we face challenges in our own lives, we can remember them. The cavemen who endured the impossible. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, don't forget to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe for more stories of survival, history, and the untold strength of humanity. Until next time, stay curious. And remember, if they could survive the Ice Age, imagine what you can overcome.